Hi, welcome to video 2 of the Making Your Planting Plan section. So we are going to continue on. We'll talk about growing in containers, and then we'll go back to just in general making that planting plan. So what if you don't have space or you aren't interested, you want to start small, you don't have space, or you just have some reason that you can't grow in the ground? Container gardening is always an option. And there are a lot of ways that it's similar, but there are ways that it is different here. So some of the similarities, plant still needs the same amount of sunlight. It has the same time that it grows, unless you learn how to grow inside and you have kind of a greenhouse sunroom, but we'll get there when you're a little more advanced. And you can grow a lot of different varieties still. The differences are you have to water a lot more, you have to fertilize it more with container gardening, and the soil that you're going to use for container gardening is different, which you'll learn about that in the next module. Okay, so there are 3 R's to set you up for success when it comes to container gardening. So preparing correctly, using the right size pot, using the correct pot in general. We don't want to use certain pots to grow in, which that information's in your book. And we'll talk about that in the next module also. And we want to have the correct soil. We really want to use potting soil. Do not use dirt from the ground. Do not use garden soil. I'll talk about that in the next module also because it's super important. And then we want to have the right choice of plant. So there's lots of varieties. Some are going to do better. They're designed to grow in a pot or container where others aren't. And an example of that is when you're going to look for seeds, some nowadays, because container gardening has gotten more popular, will say container variety like this. If it doesn't say that, you may want to try and find one that has this symbol. You can try without it. We have a list of what you can grow in containers we'll talk about in a second. And the third thing is we need to really make sure we're caring for those plants. So you need to think about that watering more. You need to make sure you're fertilizing. If you're not taking care of and giving the right care to those plants, then they're going to get really stressed out and they may die or they're just not going to do well. So think about those 3 things. So what do we grow in containers? There's a lot of options, and we really want to make sure that we're choosing quality choices for growing in containers because it can be more expensive since you're having to buy that potting soil and buy more fertilizer than you would in ground. So let's really quick here look at a resource that we have. This is chapter 1 and it's page 15 of your book. And this is just a fantastic resource that has all this information on how much sunlight different plants need here. And then it has detailed information, recommended varieties, the vegetable itself, how deep of a container, the minimum depth you need, and any notes and when you need to plant those. So I highly recommend using this as a guide. We have all that information here for you. And again, that's page 15 and 16 of your book. So let's go back to our talk about container gardening. So there are certain choices of crops that you can grow that are a better bang for your buck, I guess. So you're going to get more quantity or quality out of them. So if you're looking for quantity, these are your bet. Cherry tomatoes, you're going to get a ton. Peas, arugula, lettuce, leafy greens, things like that, peppers. If you're wanting quality, these gourmet salad greens and herbs, they're fresher and yummy, and you can just go pick them when you need them versus having to spend a lot of money at the store buying those. Okay, so going back to just choosing what you want to grow in general with gardening, so not container gardening anymore, just in general. How do we decide what we want to grow and what is going to do well? So if you can, it is helpful to try and get seeds from local seed companies that are in New Mexico, uh, or there are things called seed libraries that are in various places around the state. You can Google or ask your extension office about those. Those have seeds that were grown in our climate. They're used to our growing conditions, so they're more likely to do better. If you don't have access to those, you can just use the NMSU recommended vegetable variety list. This is a publication that's in your module. There's the link to it, so you don't have to go search for it. And that just has the list of what will grow well. So you can use that to then decide what type of variety of those specific crops you want to grow. And always, if you have questions that are specific to where you live in New Mexico, your extension office and your master gardeners are going to have that information and really set you up for success. Okay, oops. Okay. Yes, we're done with that. So, when do we want to plant? This is important. If we plant too early, then the frost may come and kill our plants, and then we have to plant again. So we want to know and gauge when the correct dates to plant are. And in your book, and we'll go check it out really fast, we have information on this. So if you go above to page 13, it has a planting date chart. And this is kind of hard to follow because it is so general that unless you're in one of these cities, it's going to be harder for you to read, but this has kind of estimates. This information is based off of the planting guide that was produced by NMSU, and that will help you. Again, it's in this module. I recommend downloading that. It has a map of the entire state, and it's color coded, it's shaded differently, so that you can specifically look at those different areas and decide what your growing area is based on that. So if you know where you are, if you're in one of these cities, you can use this, but otherwise go ahead and use that publication. And again, that is on page 13. If you want just the general list, it's on page 8. And when we are talking about our plants, I mean, you do have a window of when the average last and first frost is, but really your plant isn't reading a chart and saying, oh, okay, it's April 14th, I better go ahead and grow. They start growing and germinating based on the conditions, so how warm the soil is, what the weather is like outside. And so a way that you really can look at this if you want is to use a soil thermometer. I don't have one. What I do is when I have that range of dates where I know that it's the average last frost for Albuquerque is where I live, then I start watching the weather. So I go check out what the forecast is for the next few weeks and I base off of that. Sometimes, I think it was 2 years ago, we had this random frost, or maybe it was last year. And so I'm like, do, 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 do. And then all of a sudden there's this frost. So I had to wait and plant later. But then other times it got hot really early and I should have planted earlier and I got a late start on the season. So you just have to watch that forecast to figure it out. Okay, so let's talk about that succession planting that I was talking about. What is succession planting? And all it means is that you can plant in succession, so more than once. So you can do something like this if you're wanting to grow the same crop and doing it in two separate spots. So this is something you could do with lettuce, for example, like this. So you have some here you can eat, and then you plant more. So this will be ready to go in a few weeks. This is good for short season crops. And if you go look at that common crop chart, it has that information on if you can use that crop, if it's good for succession planting or not. We also can do succession planting with two different crops in the same spot. So you could grow lettuce, for example, and then replace it with radishes. They both grow pretty quickly. And that way you have different variety and you can eat different things through the season. Again, if you want to know information on this, it's on page 9. There's a list of crops of examples that you can start with this crop and replace it with this. So page 9 of your book has that. And another thing we need to think about, and this more is after you've been gardening for several years. If you're a beginner right now, you don't need to worry about this at all. But year by year, we want to think about trying to do crop rotation. And that just means that we're not going to keep planting the same plants in the same spot over and over and over and over. And there's a lot of benefits for this. It helps change and re-add nutrients to the soil. It's helping reduce pests and disease and different things like that. It can increase the chance of lowering those if you do rotate. This is something that as a beginner you don't need to worry about right now. So if you want more information on this, is in your book and you can go ahead and read that. And another thing that we want to think about, and you do need to think about this, is the size of your garden. This can really set you up for success, or it can make you stressed out and overwhelmed if you try and go too big at first. So think about these 4 things when you are going to start your garden. So think about this. Why are you gardening? Who's going to do the work? This is really important. If it's all you and you don't have that much time, don't do a big garden because you're not going to be able to keep up with it. Um, and then how much room do you have? So how much time do you have? How much room do you have? So if you don't have a lot of room, obviously you're limited, but more often we have enough room. It's just that we don't have enough time ourselves and no one is helping us. So when in doubt, it is so much easier to start small and expand than it is to try and wrangle a garden that's giant. And you look at it and you're like, oh, because there's just weeds everywhere and it's just a hot mess. So always start small and you can expand as you get a hang of things. Okay, so now that you have all that information and your brain is just full, I want you to create your personal planting plan. This is an activity that is in this module. So you're going to do this on your own and you will come up with something that looks like this. So I created one, I filled these out. So once you've done that, you can post that in the Facebook group or you can send it to the instructor if you are wanting some feedback. So that's it. We made it through this video. We have one more video left and we are done with the module. So I will see you in video 4. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.